Welcome to Chatsu-Nani.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Chatsu-Nani. I'm Greenshield 95, and with me is Adam. Hi, Adam.
Hello, hello. It is good to be back here, back in the studio.
Yeah, the Satsu studio. But we are without Satsunami today, aren't we?
Indeed, we are in this very, very strange, very strange. I don't quite know how to feel, but I am excited for this episode.
No, I have very big boots to fill, very big trousers to fill, whatever the expression may be. And yeah, but today we're going to be discussing the Studio Ghibli film Princess Mononoke. Yeah, so we're doing a Studio Ghibli Princess Mononoke film. The movie that came out in Japan in 1997, and 2 years later in much of the Western world, and directed by Hayao Miyazaki. It's a personal favorite of mine. Spoilers for later discussion in the show. And yeah, I'm very excited to hear what Adam's impressions were, his first impressions of the movie as a newbie to the world of anime. And but are you a newbie to the world of Studio Ghibli, Adam?
Not quite as newbie to the world of Studio Ghibli as I am to other anime. I have seen a couple of Ghibli films before. I never watched them when I was a kid. Never watched them as a young. The first one that I saw was when I was in my last year of university. I was doing a course on the Second World War. Basically, each week was divided into a different topic, and for each week we'd get a film to watch as well. The lecturer would assign us one, and so we were doing one on bombing in World War II, and so the film he gave us was Grave of the Fireflies.
Oh wow, that's quite the introduction to the world of Studio Ghibli. It's a tearjerker.
Indeed, quite the introduction, and quite still probably the most separate from the other ones I've seen. Although I think there's maybe a little bit of you could probably see a connection between this and Princess Mononoke. Between Grave of the Fireflies and Princess Mononoke. But yeah, so that was quite the introduction. And then basically that was the only one I'd seen until last year when started watching some more. So I've seen the classics now. I've seen Spirited Away, seen Kiki's Delivery Service, When Marnie Was Here. Is it When Marnie Was Here? When Marnie Was There? I can't remember.
I believe When Marnie Was Here. Yeah, I've also seen that one. I wasn't actually as impressed with that one, but that's another discussion.
Oh, fair enough. Maybe time for another one. And of course, My Neighbor Totoro. So
of course.
I have seen a couple. I know there's a lot more, obviously. So I've still got a lot of gaps in my knowledge, but I'm a bit more au fait with Studio Ghibli's work.
That's well, it's a great starting point, and as many will know, Studio Ghibli acts as a very good stepping stone for many early anime watchers. Many people will start their anime journey watching Studio Ghibli films, particularly Spirited Away or Howl's Moving Castle. It's a very good start for many. It gives you a good introduction into the world of Japanese animation. My first experience with Studio Ghibli was watching part of Spirited Away in the car. My sister was watching it on her laptop while we were on a car journey, and I watched a bit of it, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. But I didn't actually watch all of Spirited Away until many years later, and my first proper Studio Ghibli film that I watched all the way through was Princess Mononoke. So that I have a very special kind of nostalgic connection to it as a both anime and as an anime movie, because I think it was the first anime movie that I watched all the way through, barring of course the Pokemon movie. But yeah, I have a very special connection with Studio Ghibli. I think it's an absolutely wonderful animation studio. It's often considered to be like the Disney Studios of Japan, Japanese animation, and it holds such a special place for so many people. I have a very special relationship with Grave of the Fireflies, as you just mentioned as well. It's an absolutely wonderful movie. It's very hard hitting. And from what I understand, it came out at the same time or around the same time as My Neighbor Totoro, and in many cases it was screened as a double billing. So you'd watch My Neighbor Totoro and then watch Grave of the Fireflies, which just sounds like the most horrendous experience I think ever. Not anything against either of them, but it's a real kind of whiplash of films.
Especially the end on Grave of the Fireflies as well. After, I was gonna say I'd almost prefer to watch them the other way around, but maybe not actually.
I had heard this, and I'll bring up where I'd heard it later on. But listening to, or rather watching Totoro first would be the best choice, because once you've watched Grave of the Fireflies, you kind of just want to sit and just kind of not do anything for a while. There's no watching something to up you again after that. Everything after that is just oh god, no.
It's true.
Yeah, it's a very hard film, and it's a film that I recommend, despite its what we've been saying. It's a film I recommend everyone should watch. I think it's very powerful, very important, and it's a very good idea of what life in Japan was like during World War II for those in Japan, especially young children. But that's a discussion for another day. What we're going to be talking about today is Princess Mononoke. And just to give you a little bit of a background on Studio Ghibli, the studio was founded on June 15th, 1985. And after the successful performance of Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, which was part of Studio Topcraft, it's often confused as being a Studio Ghibli movie, but it's actually a Studio Topcraft movie just before Ghibli's creation. They founded Studio Ghibli. 5 of the studio's films are among the top highest grossing anime feature films made in Japan, with Spirited Away being number 2, grossing just around $380 million US at the worldwide box office. And they have won awards such as the Animage Grand Prix Award, Japan Academy Prize for Animation, and various films have received Academy Award nominations, including Spirited Away, which won both the 2002 Golden Bear Award and the 2003 Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. The movie itself, Princess Mononoke, is set in 14th century Japan and centers around Ashitaka, a boy from a small village who's cursed by a vengeful demon creature. He leaves his village to learn how to appease the forest and hopefully find a cure for his curse. On his travels, he encounters an industrial town that is responsible for the forest creature's anger, and San, a girl raised by wolves, who wants to avenge the forest. Ashitaka, is caught between the two and tries to resolve the conflict. Princess Mononoke, originally Mononoke Hime in Japan, with Hime meaning princess, and a rough translation of Mononoke being a vengeful spirit. As San, the wolf girl, was raised by wolf lords or spirits, vengeful of the death of the forest, she is the princess of the Mononoke. So yeah, that's just a little kind of background on the film. Shall we jump straight into the next section?
Let's do it.
Welcome to Chatsu-Nani, a variety podcast that talks about topics from gaming and films to streaming and general interests.
Previously on Chatsu-Nani, we discussed Game of the Decade, Deadly Premonition, the romantic thriller Birdemic, and listen to us get all sappy as we discuss our top 5 Christmas films.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcast apps. As always, stay safe,
Stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
We are Beer and Chill Podcast.
Podcast where we review TV shows, games, movies, and whatever else takes our fancy.
So what are you waiting for? If you're a cool kid like us, you're gonna listen to the Beer and Chill Podcast. You can get it anywhere from Spotify all the way to your grandmother's radio. My name is Jan.
And I'm Craigie C.
And we are
Beer and Chill.
So the film opens up with a scene where you see this kind of worm-covered creature going through the forest with a narrator talking about what's going on in the forest and the concerns of nature and mankind's involvement. And we then see our protagonist, Ashitaka, on a elk steed. We learn that this elk is called Yakul. What were your impressions of Yakul the elk, Adam?
Oh, I love Jakul. I thought, what great design, and just, that perfect, animal companion. You can just tell, loyal, dependable, and just lovely. So I was a big fan of Jakul.
Yeah, I thought he was very, very interesting, very cool design. I wasn't familiar with the animal. I thought he was on some sort of gazelle or type creature. So I actually Googled it to make sure that I understood what creature he was. And Google told me it was a red elk steed, or rather just red elk. And it actually says that later on in the movie, that Yakul is a red elk. Yeah, so we see Ashitaka on Yakul riding through this rice field or just kind of this agrarian kind of area up to a watchtower. And he climbs up the watchtower, and we already see kind of the detail under his feet. It's dirty, so it gives a bit of an understanding of what he is like as a character, what he's been up to, that he's covered in dirt, he's in nature, he's there, this kind of very rural society. And we climb up to the top of the tower, and we then sort of stare into the forest and see this boar creature, or rather this not boar creature, but this creature come out that's covered in these worms that we just saw earlier, climbing through the land with everything dying that he touches around him. And we can immediately thrown into kind of the conflict. What were your impressions seeing this creature, Adam?
Yeah, I thought this was a great intro, because it kind of sets up everything about this film. As you say, you have these beautiful you have this beautiful landscape around and everything, but there's this darkness. There's this unknown thing destroying everything, and really I feel like one of the central themes of this film is fear of the unknown. And that comes straight away when you have this thing that you have no idea what it is, as you say. It's just like a mass of like kind of worms and tendrils, and you just no idea. And it's a really striking design, and it kind of evokes that. Evokes that kind of fear, and it is a really, you don't know what to like make of it, but you just know it's something. You just know it's something bad. You know,
yeah.
you don't know what it is.
This creature imbues death around it. It's what it kind of reminded me a lot of was kind of a bit like Venom from the Marvel films. Like it's almost like this, like a symbiote kind of thing clinging to it with these kind of, and there's always tendrils coming off of it. I don't know if you got a similar kind of vibe from that, or if you had a different impression.
No, that's actually, I didn't think of that at the time, but just you saying that is like absolutely totally thinking of it. I kind of saw it kind of like maggots, you know, when like kind of maggots congeal around like kind of dead flesh. I kind of got that vibe from it, but the symbiote thing I think is a perfect analogy.
It seems when you learn more about it, it seems to sort of stick a little bit more to it as well. We learned that this is a demon or a demonized creature, and that upon Ashitaka confronting it and trying to stop it, Ashitaka, our protagonist, touches the creature. These kind of maggoty, venom-like tendrils touch his arm, and it immediately infects his arm with what we learn to be a curse. After fighting it and shooting it with an arrow through the head, the Boar King, which we learn, or rather the demon which we learn is a boar and the king of boars, dies, and it tells him that they will all suffer his hate. And after that, as the flesh melts off of him and he becomes bone, which was pretty terrifying. And I imagine if you were a young child watching that, that would have really freaked you out.
No doubt it was. Yeah, it certainly was. Yeah, like this film surprised me, like in a lot of its kind of imagery and like how like terrifying it was, you know, at points and everything. It was a real shock, but I think again it's so effective at setting that up because you do have this just idyllic village. You know, it's like any kind of village you'd see on a postcard of the Japanese countryside, something like that, and then it's all of a sudden just like, you know, it's threatened with whatever this creature is you just don't know to begin with, and as you say, and you find out it is this like manifestation of hatred and everything, and it's properly frightening. So it really sets up the stakes of everything to come.
Yeah, for sure, it does, and it does make it sort of an interesting kind of juxtaposition of this beautiful landscape and country, and then just death coming down and this horrible creature arriving, and then the flesh melting off of it as it dies, and the prophecy that it gives. It's all very interesting, very kind of clashing with each other, which is beautiful. And Ghibli is known for its absolutely wonderful landscapes, as are many anime movies, to be fair. But Ghibli kind of sets the stage for a lot of them, I feel. After the Boar King is dead and Ashitaka has received the curse on his arm, he talks to like a council of elders in his village. We learn that Ashitaka is a prince of the village, and this is a very special village of a forgotten people or a kind of a refugee-like people from some situation long, long ago. And that because of the curse, Ashitaka must leave the village and go and investigate what caused this demon creature to arrive and to be created in the first place, and hopefully to try and cure his arm. What we then see is Ashitaka leaves, and straight away he encounters a rice field being raided by a group of like bandits, and he uses his now demon-powered arm to fire arrows, which immediately dismembers and decapitates the raiders with each shot. What do you make of that, Adam?
That was so. I was watching this film with my fiance when the guy is first literally disarmed. The first shot, she was the biggest gasp I've ever heard her let out, and I was the exact same. That was the real shock as well, because I knew this film had like some elements of like war and conflict and things like that. I did not expect at all though the kind of like brutality and kind of say gore. It's not really gory, but it's like quite I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it's quite shocking in terms of like actual some of the violence that actually happens. So that was a real shock. But again, I think it's like really effective. And I was reading as well that I think Miyazaki was inspired. I say inspired is kind of the wrong word, but like at the time that he was making this film, the country of Yugoslavia was basically falling apart, and there was immense civil wars between different ethnic groups there. With all the you know the kind of atrocities that happened in the wake of that. I think that kind of influenced him to kind of make a more realistic depiction of what the world can be like. You know, it's not always something like My Neighbor Totoro. There is a lot of darkness as well, and he brought that through. But it was a real shock. But it didn't. Looking back at it, it didn't feel like it doesn't feel like unnecessary. You know, when you watch a lot of films, sometimes you're like, this is just unnecessary amount of gore or whatever. There's no real purpose to it. Like watching the film as a whole, I'm like, yeah, like that kind of needs to be in there because it really sets up what this world is.
And that is a very interesting thing about Studio Ghibli films and a lot of other anime films, of the influence of outside history and culture and contemporary experiences influencing the stories and the motifs in the movie. There's a lot of other later films that take inspiration, and some of his earlier films, such as Castle of Cagliostro, which wasn't Studio Ghibli, but Miyazaki worked on it, very European inspired. So yeah, that's very interesting you say that there was an influence from the sort of Yugoslavian kind of conflict. We then, after saving this village, and we go into a new village that has, or maybe the same village, but further in, that has a market. Ashitaka is trying to trade with a merchant lady for a bag of rice, and he's trying to give her some gold, like a small kind of golden nugget, which would be worth a lot, but to the less informed person, it just seems like nothing. And so we then meet Jigo, who claims he's a monk. I'm skeptical of that, but who knows? Who comes across a bit of a sort of a sleazy businessman at times. He comes over and he kind of convinces the merchant that this is gold and worth a lot more than the rice, and if she doesn't want it, he'll happily take the gold off of him and pay for the rice for him. And that kind of leads to a whole kind of raucous, and Jigo kind of makes friends with Ashitaka, and they head out of town and go start a campfire. What were your initial impressions of Jigo?
Yeah, Jigo was interesting because like when he first showed up and he kind of like tagged along with Ashitaka, I kind of was like, oh, this is going to be like, you know, his sidekick, you know, and it's that kind of almost classic, more rotund sidekick who's jolly, you know, and like, but is also very loyal as well, which is kind of what I thought it was going to be. I don't know, that's not the way it goes, so it was kind of a nice, you know, it kind of took me by surprise. Also, as well, I was just loving his shoes. I didn't notice them at first, but his shoes are wow. I
also made a note of his shoes, saying Jigo wears the highest sandals I've ever seen.
Are they real shoes? I'd love to actually find out if they're actually real or they're just like, it's just that stylized way to give that kind of a striking image. But yeah.
So, from what I understand, and I have not been to Japan, I don't know enough about Japan to say this, that is kind of the standard of what shoes at the time were like. I don't know enough to say why they were designed that way. It might have been...
rice paddy thing. I wondered if...
Well, I was about to say something akin to that it might have been for crossing kind of the wetlands, because that's the reason why there were lots of high heel sandals and stilts used hundreds of years ago in European culture. So I don't know if there was a similar kind of situation in Japan over the rice fields. I will also note, presumably you watched the English dub, or did you watch the Japanese dub of...
No, watch the Japanese original with the subtitles.
Oh, this is a switcheroo. I watched the English dub for this one, and the voice of Jigo is Billy Bob Thornton.
Oh, nice. The voice cast for the English one looked amazing. Like,
it was so good. I've made a note of each of the people in particular that came up. So we have Jigo, voiced by Billy Bob Thornton in the English dub, who while around the campfire is telling Ashitaka of the wider world and of the spirit of the forest. We are then getting kind of more looks over the stunning landscape as they were at this campsite, and we're then moving further into the countryside. And that's where we then meet Lady Eboshi, voiced by Minnie Driver. Those who aren't familiar with Minnie Driver, you might have seen her in Good Will Hunting, or as the voice of Jane in the Disney's Tarzan, or if I'm missing any other important ones, you'll have to let me know. But yeah, and she's driving cattle and merchandise through the mountains. What were your impressions of Lady Eboshi?
Lady Eboshi was really interesting. Like from that first depiction, you kind of get it. You don't get the full sense, because I think she develops to be, I would argue, the most interesting character in the whole film. But like you get a lot of a sense from the first, and you kind of see like how imposing she is, and like how calm and determined, and like a natural born leader. So you start to get a lot of like senses, and you can see this, like you already get to see this conflict that's developing, that's ongoing between the animal world and the human world. So again, just a really effective scene, and the image as well of all those like of the oxen like lumbering up like the devastated like landscape as well is very striking, and yeah, it provides like another really visual, especially when you have like the white wolves charging down as well. Like it just gets so striking just in that way. It's just beautiful to look at.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. They put so much detail into sort of the struggle of getting the oxen or the cattle or whatever they were up the mountain, and sort of the way the mountain has been created. And it looks like it's of a man-made pathway blown through the mountains. And then, yeah, as you say, we have the wolf girl, Princess Mononoke, which is not actually her name. Her name, as we learn later, is San, and her wolves are attacking the convoy. And we see this attack happen, and they get fended off. And then the next scene we see is of Ashitaka down by the river, where he encounters some injured men from conflict that we just discussed with attacking the wolves. And he helps these 2 injured men out of the river, and then sees San across the river with the wolves. San immediately sees him. He stands out, introduces himself. She just says nothing, walks away, and then the last thing she says is "go away." And then leaves. Did you get any kind of impression from San or the wolves from that?
I mean, it's a hell of an introduction. Like, it's well done at first, because I found it very difficult to tell, and I think this is maybe this is deliberate, or maybe this is just me, but I found it very difficult to tell what was riding the wolf at first, because she's wearing that mask,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because it's moving so fast, it's not really clear. Like, I first wondered if it was like a kind of like forest creature or something, something like that. But then, as you said, we find out it is like it's a human riding, and as well, like a scene where after she takes her mask off, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first thing she does is like sucks the blood out of like the wound that's inflicted on one of the wolves, and then he turns around to see that kind of blood, which I think is one of like the images you see a lot for like the marketing of it and stuff, with her like the blood on her face and everything. And again another really striking image, and you like completely understand this is like, as much as she's a human, she's clearly of the animal world, and you can just see the kind of like, you can see the hatred in her that she has towards humans and everything, which again is going to be another defining characteristic of her. So again, it's just everything about this film is just so well set up, and you can instantly, like, it's simple in a way that you can instantly kind of understand who people are, and sort of like their relationships, but as well, like, the film is complex, and as you learn more, you get to delve more into these characters. So I think it's just so well done.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's very, very interesting. It kind of demonstrates the wild child nature of her. I don't know if she's sucking out like the bullet or some kind of like injury that's there, and has the blood kind of smeared across her face, and then she stares towards Ashitaka with kind of blood across her face, and it is a wonderful, wonderful imagery that's shown there. So San then leaves, and we're then left with Ashitaka, Yakul, and these 2 men, one of which is more conscious than the other. So the conscious one sits on top of Yakul, and Ashitaka carries the other man on his back through the forest. It's at this time that we see some of the little tree spirits, the little small white blobby creatures which look like they have kind of long masks that rotate and have 3 kind of domino spot eyes across their face, and they look very playful, very childlike, very like a cherub-like creatures, creepy and cute at the same time, who are going through the forest making clicking noises as their heads turn. One of the human who's conscious, the stranger who's conscious, is terrified of them. Ashitaka seems to be much more trustful of these spirits, and they're very cute. They're following them through the forest, leading them through, and they're mimicking Ashitaka, piggybacking the stranger on his back, and it's very cute. What did you make of them?
Yeah, they were again another really cool like introduction, because as you say, like when you first see them, it looks really creepy. It is that kind of like that hollow face, and you're like, God, like what is this? Like almost like a husk type thing, and then it starts doing the clicking, and it is very creepy. But then as you see more of them, like, they do become a lot cuter. It's so funny, because I think you see a lot. The first one as well has like that kind of like just face. It's almost like that famous, they call it the Scream or whatever, that painting.
Mm-hmm.
That face, but then you see others with more like smiling faces, and more kind of gentle features and stuff. So again, like, it's really good at just highlighting that, like, that sense of unknown, and you can totally see in the different reactions. So obviously, like the injured man, like, just freaks out and panics. Again, it's this unknown thing, and he's part of the settlement that's been in conflict with the animal world, so he's just like almost hardwired to like be afraid of anything from the kind of like animal spirit world, while Ashitaka is much more like, as much as he knows like they are like forest tree spirits, but again, like, often doesn't come into much contact with them, but again is much more like curious and trusting. So it's interesting that, again, you get 2 different reactions to them.
They're a lot like, the best thing I could compare them to probably would be like Koroks from the Legend of Zelda series. I don't know if you're familiar with Koroks in the Zelda series, but they're kind of little tree creatures as well.
Oh, I think I know the ones you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, so they're a lot like them, very smiley, especially the ones in both Wind Waker and Breath of the Wild. They're very, very similar to the little tree spirits in Princess Mononoke. And what's interesting is there is a lot of creepiness and scariness in this movie, but the tree spirits are never actually scary in this movie. They're never like the threat. They're often interacting with the threat, but they themselves are never the threat. So yeah, so we then proceed further into the forest, and the tree spirits lead us to a pond. And there's an island in the middle of the pond. That's where Ashitaka and the Yukul and the two people are resting. After being in the water for a little bit, our Ashitaka and the men kind of wounds start to feel better and heal a little bit. So you can tell there's kind of a magical property to this. Ashitaka sees through a glimpse of the trees a deer with way too many antlers. Like if you think of like a deer with too many antlers, like add like 5 more antlers on that, and then like you're kind of halfway there. There's something very strange about this deer that you kind of somewhat catch a glimpse of.
Like, yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, just like, it's just that way you instantly know, you can instantly tell, you're like, right, this is something important, this deer catcher. And we don't know what it is at the minute, and we only see an outline, but you can instantly tell, right, this is something important. I had to laugh. I do think this film has some great like comedic moments. I thought that bit was great where, like, as you say, they're in the water and they're kind of healing up, and then Ashitaka gains some strength, so he's able to, like, carry the guy, like, much faster. Mm-hmm. But the other injured guy who's, like, broken his arm is like, oh, my arm feels much better. And he takes his sling off and, like, stretches it. Oh, no, still broken. You know, that was a really funny moment. A nice bit of, like, humor. And again, it's just, it's such a nice contrast, like, from the scene we've had before where the oxen were, like, trudging up the hill, and it almost looks like a kind of, like, World War I battlefield with all this, like, churned up mud and like it's blackened earth and like scorched trees and everything like that. We then get this like idyllic grove and lake and everything, and just this kind of serene, just peaceful scene. It's just such a nice contrast as we go deeper into the forest. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's that way of like on the outside of the forest, it seems like the forest seems like mysterious and scary, you know. But once you're inside it, you know, it's this like beautiful like piece of unspoiled nature. So again, just a really nice contrast that I think it gets set up.
Yeah, for sure. It is a great kind of contrast of the industrial, the warfare, and against the kind of idyllic forest grove, as you're saying. And it is wonderful, and that's kind of the conflict in the movie of that industrial versus nature and spirit world, and that kind of clash that they have. So speaking of the industrial, we then proceed through the forest, and on the other side we catch a glimpse of Iron Town, this industrial fortified town, just that's kind of not an island, but it's kind of like a little peninsula kind of area, sort of centered around water. And we head over to the town, and the village sort of sees that these 2 injured men that they kind of just like, oh, they're probably dead, are now back, and everyone kind of rushes over and sees them. And we have one of the kind of henchmen of Lady Eboshi, Gonzo, comes over, who is voiced in the English dub by John DiMaggio. You might know him as Bender in Futurama. And I'm pretty sure from the English dub, I'm pretty sure he voices a lot of the other like side characters as well. Just like occasionally characters will speak, and I'm like, is that just John DiMaggio again? I could be wrong there, but that's kind of what I figured. They might have just gotten him to just fill in for a lot of characters. So he can exactly maximize the paycheck. He confronts Ashitaka upon his arrival to the industrial village, and the women of the town and the men that they helped sort of vouch for him and say that he's good. And Lady Eboshi steps in, and sort of you can tell that she's who is in charge in this town, and we find out that she is fighting against the forest to take its resources, which of course is a commentary on industrialization, which is a theme in a lot of Ghibli movies, that a lot of time they're talking about industrialization or warfare and things like that to try and spread their message of what Ghibli feels should be protecting forests and pacifism and that kind of ideal. Ashitaka then quickly figures out that Eboshi is responsible for the issues of the forest and for the Boar King becoming a demon. What were your initial impressions of Iron Town and of sort of the settlement and Eboshi and what we're finding out about Eboshi?
Again, I think it's that really clever way of, as you go into Iron Town, like you find out so much more about it. So when we first see it, it's such, again, I feel like this is my word of the episode, striking, but I feel like it's just the perfect way to describe like so much of this film. But as Ashitaka and the men come out of the forest and we look across the lake, as you say, like we have Iron Town there, and it's just desolate. It's just a desolate hillside around it, and it's all like you can tell it's fortified. You know, it's fortified for war, and there's smoke. Everything. It's all like black buildings and everything. And it's a complete like contrast to like the forest that we've just been in. And on the outside, it looks like quite an imposing and scary place. And you're like, oh, it looks like the kind of evil. You're like, oh, there's the if you had to point, like, well, there's the evil. There's what's wrong with the world there. Mm-hmm. But then we go to and we actually get to see the inhabitants. we get to see their lives, and we see that these are just people, you know, in the day, and like they're people just trying to survive, make a living, you know, gain some level of comfort and everything. And we see some more of the society. We find out more about Lady Eboshi, and as I said earlier, like Lady Eboshi, like I would honestly hold her up as like, this is how you create like a well-rounded, well-fleshed out and a complex character, because just like when you first see her, she has that maybe look of being the villain, and you're like, oh, it looks like maybe it might just be a kind of a stock character, but there's so many layers to her. And as you find out more about the town and its inhabitants, and you find out that the women like in the town are like people that Lady Eboshi's rescued from the brothels, and then we find out more as we find out some other like people of society that she's looking after. It just completely fleshes her out to be this character that you're like, you know, she's not good and she's not bad. She's a morally grey character, like basically everybody is, like, you know, like real human beings are. And so it just lends this authenticity to the film that, you know, like as much as this is taking place in a kind of quote unquote fantasy setting, these feel like real people. Like these are people that you can recognize in everyday life. And it just makes it so much more effective. I just think it's brilliant that as you go into Irontown, that's when we see so much more about it, and it's not just this one-dimensional place that, again, it looks like from the outside.
Yeah, that's a great point. You've covered a lot of things that I was going to bring up as well, as like the Lady Eboshi rescuing the brothel residents and lepers and whatnot. What is an interesting kind of idea as well is that going into this movie, if you think that there is going to be a black and white as to who's good and who's bad, initially when you see the demon creature, you think, okay, so this is man versus demon. And then you see the demon was created by man. So you're like, okay, so now it's a case of nature protecting itself from industrialization, which it is to an extent. Then you start to learn about the backgrounds of the people, so they aren't the villains necessarily. And so there, as you say, yeah, it is very grey. There is no black and white in this movie. You understand the positions of a lot of the characters. You like some and then don't like them later on, and it kind of you're sort of switching around. And yeah, afterwards we see that Lady Eboshi is sort of making guns, and the people who are making the guns are lepers. She looks after the downtrodden, buying out brothel contracts, helping out lepers. The lepers say that she's washed out their rotten flesh. I don't know enough about leprosy, but I'm pretty sure that is a way of getting leprosy. So I don't know whether or not that would that's necessarily the safest course of action, but I also don't know enough about leprosy. After we have this conversation, Eboshi says that she wants Ashitaka to stay and help her defeat the spirits of the forest, and that once they do defeat the spirit of the forest, they might be able to heal both Ashitaka's curse and potentially heal the lepers that are with her with the spirit's power. Ashitaka has to sort of consider this, but is more on the side of nature in the situation. And that is when the wolf clan attacks the town. We see that the wolf girl is after Eboshi, is going to try and assassinate Eboshi, and that she's wearing her cool, spooky mask that you mentioned earlier. Eboshi says the quote, "Cut off a wolf's head and it still has the power to bite," which I noted at the time I just said that that's just not the case. That's not how that works. But as we'll get into later, that might still come to pass. And then after much kind of conflict in the town, with San, the wolf girl, being blown off of a rooftop and falling and then charging at Lady Eboshi and fighting, Ashitaka comes over to try and resolve the conflict. And in one move, he just whacks both of them kind of in the stomach. They knocks both of them out, throws San over his shoulder, and leaves Lady Eboshi to her men to look after. He starts to walk out of the town with San over his shoulder. He's threatened to be shot by one of the women who don't want San to leave because she's responsible for their husband's death. And San is then shot with like the biggest bullet hole you've just ever seen. And like an absolute champ, he just keeps going, bleeding out.
I think that's what's like really. I think this is where we start to learn a lot about Ashitaga in this one. As much as he is a warrior, you know, and like one of the first thing we see him doing in the film is like, you know, fighting and defending the village. You actually see like strong moral code that he has. In that, as much as he is like obviously trained to fight and very proficient at it, he's actually very restrained in this film. Like, It takes a lot for him to, like, you know, to actually, like, draw his weapon and like, actually, you know, like, use his, like, fighting skills and everything. As you say, like, he goes in, it's not, and when Eboshi and San are fighting, he goes in there to stop it, you know, and to, like, basically, you know, like, disarm them both and just, like, end the fight without bloodshed. And even after he's, like, shot, you know, as you say, there's like gaping like bullet wounds in him as blood's pouring out. He doesn't react at all. So you get that you can see like the moral, like his sense of morality and, you know, what he's here to do, you know, as much as he's a man trained for war, like he clearly doesn't, he's not a promoter of it. he's clearly only use it as a last resort. So again, it fleshes him out so much and brings a lot more to his character and makes him like a lot more like, makes him, I'll not say he's not likable, because he is likable for the whole film, but makes him a lot more like, you want to like root for him, and because he is like represents balance in a way.
Yeah, he is. He's a very neutral character in the film. He doesn't take sides. He defends what he believes is right and wrong, but he doesn't sort of impose necessarily in either direction. He's not necessarily just fighting for the forest. He's not necessarily fighting for the humans. He's kind of trying to mediate between the two. And yeah, so he heads to the gate after being shot through with a giant bullet hole, and is told that the gate requires 10 men to open it, and that he'll die if he tries just by himself. He then proceeds and succeeds in pushing the gate open because he has his demonic super strong arm, and heads out with Yakul, and they ride off. Soon afterwards, San wakes up, and luckily upon San waking up, she managed to catch that Ashitaka has gone unconscious and has fallen off of Yakul. She goes to sort of help him out. The wolves immediately launch on him to attack him, but she stops them. And that's when we encounter the monkey creatures. What did you make of these kind of monkey creatures?
They are, again, another terrifying bunch of creatures that just show up and, like, do we see them, am I right in saying we see them a little bit earlier when Ashitaga is, like, having his meeting with Eboshi, and she, like, I think she fires off a gun to try and, like scatter them because they're trying to plant trees again?
Yeah, so early, I missed that early, but yes, so she fends off these monkey kind of creatures who are trying to plant trees to fix the hillside, to restore nature back on the hillside, so treats them almost like a weed, saying that they keep coming back each night and you have to like scare them off, and these poor creatures are obviously just trying to sort of repair the forest, repair their home in a very kind of peaceful kind of way, and they're being pushed off, and you can tell they're becoming more and more demonic. You never, as far as I remember, you never actually see what they truly look like. They're always kind of silhouetted, which makes them incredibly creepy.
Yeah, but it's a lot later on in the film. That's what I was going to say, because like that it's not until much later, like near the end, that you see them like in their actual form when they're in the forest. But it's that really fantastic way of seeing them in this desolate landscape, and they look like shades basically, and they look like really scary and terrifying. And you can like almost see why the humans look so scared of them, because they're all black, and it's like the red eyes, and they look like demons. And you can also see like they're like come with the hatred of the humans and everything, because the humans have like eradicated the forest and destroyed their homeland, and they're trying to, they want to like take their revenge on the humans. So you just see this world that's like filled with hatred on both sides. Like, and there just seems to be no way. Like, they're just in complete conflict, and there's going to be any way to kind of bridge that.
It's interesting because you're seeing, and they say that they want to eat the human, being Ashitaka, to gain his power. And so they've run out of ideas of what to do. They've been trying to plant these trees peacefully. It's not worked. They keep being pushed back. So they think, well, if we take the power of the humans by eating them, then we'll be able to drive off these other humans. And of course, that's not how it works. And we learned that would turn them into demons, like we saw earlier with the boar. From what they look like now, they look like there are already demons, but I think that maybe is not the case at the moment. They are just kind of very mysterious, silhouetted kind of monkey creatures at the moment, and that they would become demons should their hatred manifest any further. But yeah, so they are pushed away by the wolves when the wolves had enough of their disrespect towards them. You can tell that the wolves are the most feared creatures in the forest, as they scare them off, and then they head towards the pond that we saw earlier, where Ashitaka and the two men were earlier. That is where San takes him to be healed, and that's when we see a gigantic spirit arrives. This kind of night shifter or night creature, I can't remember what they called him, Night Strider or something like that, arrives, which then becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and then becomes this deer-like creature that we saw earlier with a very creepy face. Well, what do you make of this spirit creature?
That face terrified me. In its kind of like Night Strider form. Again, it's such an imposing, and you really get the sense of scale, how clearly like important and central this thing is to the forest life, and in the way it's striding across, it's really, really imposing. And then as it like transforms down into its thing, the face is hell of a creepy when because it's like an elk, it's like a kind of deer's body with this like almost human-esque face, and it's really, but I suppose like in a way it's again, it's that like unknown sense, and it's that like this is something that we don't have any real knowledge of it or any real we have nothing to really compare it to. So it is that kind of frightening thing from the outside, and it's not done anything. In fact, the forest spirit is like universally helpful and kind and gentle and not threatening at all. But just in the way it looks so unsettling, and you can just tell we're in a completely different world now. We've gone from the very kind of relatable and human world of Irontown into this kind of fantastical realm.
Yeah, exactly. We've gone into this spirit realm, as it were, and we're seeing this creature that is not like any of the other kind of creatures we've seen. Because even the wolves are just sort of very large wolves, and you can kind of relate it to them being very large wolves. We see some of the boars and other creatures that they're just boars, whereas this creature is very otherworldly. You can make an argument for the tree spirits or the demon at the very start, but this does have a very different feel from what we've seen so far. And the human-like face, as it was described earlier, I don't know if necessarily that it's human-like. It's far more uncanny than that, but it is a very interesting look. But yes, this spirit creature seems to be very kind and life-giving. It heals Ashitaka's wound, and I think it might heal. I think it's one of the wolves might be injured or something as well, and it heals them. Well, that might be later in the movie. And then we get a glimpse of Jigo again, the monk, who appears to be scouting the forest spirit. He's watching the forest spirit. And we also then see a giant white boar arriving that Jigo is scouting with the boar's tribe. There's absolutely hundreds and hundreds of boars. And the leader, who we learn is called Lord Akodo, who was infamous and was supposed to have died over 100 years ago. And I don't know if we can tell at that point, but Akodo is blind. He's completely white fur, and I think from old age, his eyes are kind of milky white and a lot of kind of pus kind of around the eyes. It's very gross. Again, it's one of those kind of aesthetic kind of things. It tells you a lot about Akodo and what he's lived through. And I think that's very interesting. What do you make of the boar tribe?
Yeah, again, it's such an interesting thing, and it's just the scale of it as well. As you say, seeing this is this mass. There's this horde of them, just tramping up. It's a really impressive, sight, and you know something this is something big, and you can. We don't quite know why they're all showing up, but you can tell it's for something important, and then you can instantly identify this white one is the leader, and just as you say, from the visuals, we can tell this is an old, an old warrior in many ways who's been through a lot, and you can see from the scars, and as you say, his features and everything. Again, you just know something important is going to happen, and there's an important reason for why they're here again. So it sets up that great intrigue, because things are starting. We've seen basically I think all the major players now. I think at this point kind of entered onto the stage, and so now we're just it's just they're getting themselves arranged on the board and everything, and so you're really just so intrigued to see what's happening, and how this is all going to unfold.
It's certainly more than 30 to 50 wild boars that are trespassing. I don't know if you know that meme. So we then cut back over to Ashitaka, whose wound has been healed, but the curse is still there. So the spirit of the forest has healed the wound, but not the curse. And we see that Yakul, who had his reins taken off of him by Sand and told that you're free to go if you want. Absolute MVP, fantastic, always around. Great lad. He's stayed with Ashitaka throughout. He's allowed to go free, but he stays with his best pal Ashitaka. Shout out to you, cool, wherever you are. And San then feeds Ashitaka by pre-chewing food for him. My girlfriend, who was also watching it with me, just commented, "That's nasty, TBH." So I've included that as her sole comment of the movie.
Another striking visual, and not quite in the beautiful landscape form, but yeah, it certainly was. We had a pretty similar reaction watching it.
Yeah. So we then have the two players, the Boars and the Wolf Clan, confronting each other. San speaks to Lord Akodo, who is voiced by Keith David. I don't know if you're familiar with Keith David. He's a pretty prolific voice actor.
Any Rick and Morty fans out there? He's the president. He voices the president.
Oh, of course he does. Of course he does. Yeah, I knew I recognized the voice when I heard it in Rick and Morty. One of my favorite Keith David roles was Goliath in Gargoyles. I don't know if you ever watched Gargoyles.
Oh, I've not seen that. No, I need to check it out.
Oh, it was a wonderful. It came out the 90s. It was very progressive for the 90s, and it's all. If you have Disney Plus, it's all on Disney Plus. So I recommend checking that out. Yeah. So Keith David, Lord Akodo. is very understanding of Ashitaka's situation, of the curse and what he's put himself through, but says that if he does see him again, he will kill him. So there's only so much tolerance that Lord Okoto has towards Ashitaka and humans. It's very interesting that San being raised by wolves is just seen as a wolf. There's never but you're a human from any of the other creatures. There's no animosity towards San for being a human. She is a wolf to them. And I think that is so interesting that she is so part of the wolf clan that there is no animosity towards her.
Again, it kind of contrasts with like the human reaction, as you say, because she is viewed as like something very like strange, not like, as much as they identify her as a human, like they also identify her as this like kind of feral creature in a way. As you say, like when it comes to the animal world, she's just identified as like an animal. She's identified just as a wolf. And as well, like, it's interesting you saying like the kind of, there's only so much tolerance, like from Okoto, Lord Okoto and the boars and stuff. Just sets up like this is a world of like polar opposites. And everybody is like, the animals and humans are just arrayed against each other. They've just been pushed to such extremes now that, like, again, there seems to be no way of compromise and like communication and understanding. It's just like opposition and just strife, basically now.
That war is the only option. There's nothing else that can be done. That there's no mitigating this. It's what's going to happen. Exactly. And the final scene we have, I think, in the forest, in this area, is we cut over to the forest spirit, who is still there, standing on the water, and just gives a really derpy face, like looking over. And like, I'm sure it's not supposed to be like that, but I burst out laughing. I just thought it looked so stupid. I love so much about this film, and like, I still love that scene, but it did make me laugh because I thought it looked silly. I don't know if you had a similar reaction or not, or if you remember the scene I'm talking about.
I'm too creeped out by its face. I was just like, oh god, kill it with fire.
oh, that's later in the movie. That is later in the movie. So
that's true. I'm clearly on the human. I'm a dirty human here.
Yeah, you're getting ahead of yourself here. Unlike the spirit of the forest. So we then cut over to Irontown again, which is under attack by a human lord's army. We learn that another lord, Lord Asano, a human lord, wants to take half of Irontown's iron ore, which, of course, it would never be half. That's what they would say, and then, of course, they'd be taking all of it. And so Jigo is back and wants to hunt the spirit of the forest, presumably to sell to the emperor, who we learn believes it will grant him immortality. It's established early, but Irontown appears to be a matriarchal society. We're seeing more interaction with the women of the town and sort of their kind of roles and how important they are, and they're kind of bossing all the men around. And we then, after sort of having that brief kind of show at Irontown, the conflict with another human faction, we see that we cut over to the wolf leader, Moro, who is voiced by Gillian Anderson of X-Files and Sex Education fame. I don't know if I've missed out any of her big credits, then you'll have to let me know. I'm always bad at that.
She's done a lot. We could spend the rest of the episode.
I think those X-Files is probably her most famous, and then Sex Education is her most current that people are aware of, I think. And so the wolf leader Moro is talking to Ashitaka. And she very nonchalantly just talks about like how, I thought about killing you in your sleep, but I didn't. Which Ashitaka just kind of ignores that comment and just keeps talking. I thought that made me laugh as well. That like she was like, if you'd stirred in your sleep, I would have bitten your head off. And he's like, nice weather we're having. And from that conversation, we also learned that Moro received San from San's human parents because they were scared of Moro and kind of just left San to die so that they could escape. And so kind of demonstrating that humans don't even care about their own kin, and that Moro, being a much kinder, more wizened being, decided instead of eating this baby, she would raise it as her own. And so that's kind of this very quick kind of origin story of San, and one of the many reasons that Moro and the wolf tribe hate humans, and why San has justification to also hate humans, because she was abandoned by her own kind. And then we see that the wolf clan speaks to the leader of the boars, or rather just one of the boars, and says that they're going to team up with the boars to attack Kaboshi's army, which prompts Ashitaka to go back into Irontown, which we see is under attack from Lord Asano's army. He then leaves Irontown, so it's a very brief visit, not even stopping for tea, to go and tell Eboshi that the town needs help. Upon riding off to deliver that message, Yakul is shot by an arrow in his back leg justifiably, Ashitaka is not happy and proceeds to kill the men who attacked Yakul with his demon arm, sort of, again, decapitating or just completely destroying these men. And we then see Ashitaka leading the injured Yakul away. I let off a gasp when Yakul got shot. I don't know about you, but I was horrified that Yakul, best man, got hurt in any way.
I know that was a shock as well. That was the most tension when we were in our household when we were watching it. We were like absolute fear for Yakul, but thankfully made it through. So it was spared, because I don't think I could have carried on if Yakul had gone there. I think I'd had to like just call it into the film. I don't think it could have survived.
Yeah. That's always the way with animals. There's a website that my partner always looks at. It's called doesthedogdie.com, and it tells you if an animal dies in a movie. It's not always dogs. Sometimes it's cats or horses or anything like that. And so if an animal appears, then they're like quickly like check to make sure, like, if this is going to happen, I'm not going to watch it. We then see that Ashitaka delivers the message to the Irontown men, saying that sort of the town's under attack and need to help. And we see one of the men is got some pretty bad PTSD from the battle with the boars, so we didn't see too much of the battle with the boars. We saw that the boars were kind of like climbing up the side of the mountain, and the Irontown men were kicking stones that had dynamite in them off of the top of the cliff, which was blowing them off. And so the boars were kind of destroyed mainly. The majority of the boars were killed. A lot of the humans seem to have died or have been attacked, and this one guy is pretty out of shape from it. He's not doing well. And we see that one of the wolves is injured. Ashitaka runs over to go help him.
It is like a really I get it. It's just such like a I need to look at a thesaurus. I need to find another word for striking. But, again, it's just that like as like we show up. As Ashitaka like shows up, and we just see the aftermath of like the battle and just like the carcasses strewn everywhere. And as well, we start to see the kind of, as you say, the psychological toll that this is taking on the people of Irontown and everything, and just especially with this one where they've basically been used as like cannon fodder by like Jigo and like his like the Emperor's kind of troops and stuff have basically used them as like a kind of like human shield to like basically lure the boars in so they can like wipe them out. Their lives really mean nothing. In the day, like in the grand scheme of like the Emperor's plans, they're just pawns to be like disposed of and everything. And we just see like the psychological toll breaking like down and everything, and just the body's just like laid out and everything, like just covered up. Yeah, again, it's just that way of like we get to see, not only do we see like what's happening, but we get to see like the actual impact. And again, this is like it's such a relatable moment. That image of like the battlefield after the Battle of the Boars, you could like you could apply to any like war, like modern, ancient, medieval, whatever, like just that the imagery, and it just like stays in your mind. It's just like such a powerful image and everything. Again, it's just so impressive. Like I just get everything about this film, just the way it's done is so impressive.
War never changes, my friend.
Indeed.
So we then move on to Ashitaka taking one of the wolves to go be healed to the spirit pond and to try and warn San and Eboshi. And we see that Akoto is being led to the spirit pond as well by San, and that some hunters are pretending to be boars to trick Akoto into leading them to the forest spirit. We're also then seeing that Akoto is starting to become a demon, which is obviously it's a very horrible scene where he kind of he's driven mad and he's determined to run forward, and these tendrils are forming on him, and San is trying to wipe them away to prevent him from becoming a demon, and she's then consumed by the demon worms and pulled in, which is a horrible scene. It's a lot like you won't have seen this yet, but it's a lot like in Akira when the girl in Akira is pulled in by the monster. Akitasha arrives and tells Eboshi that Irontown is under attack. Eboshi does not give a shit and says that the girls are good enough to defend the town by themselves. They don't need her help, and that she's determined to sort of kill the forest spirit. Akitashi then goes and tries to free San from the demon worms, but is repelled from it. We see that Moro, the wolf, is also very injured and close to death, but she managed to fight Lord Akoto, which her fight with him seems to get rid of the demon worms. The kind of demon worms will die, and which frees San from the grasp, and then Moro proceeds to die. The spirit of the forest arrives and then proceeds to have its head blown off, which the majesty of of the spirit is kind of ruined by how weird its face is, and it then becomes kind of a vengeful blob kaiju engulfing the forest. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
I mean, I think it's fascinating again to see more of Lady Yaboshi's character because, you know, as you say, like we've established that like she is like dedicated to Irontown and to its inhabitants and stuff, but it does that kind of like weird moment where she kind of just abandons it and is like, oh, it'll be fine, you know, like. But I think it's really interesting because it shows like in the way like how warped she's become, in a way that she's become so focused on this, like I must like kill this spirit because this is going to be the final victory. If I can take this thing down, then there's like nothing to stop us. And so this is for like the greater good in the end, to the point of ignoring like the immediate peril that her settlement's in at the minute. It's just that the dangers of becoming that like laser focused. It's that way, you know, you don't see the forest for the trees. I think it's just fascinating to see Ashitaga again just be so restrained, and you know his goal is to save everybody. You know, so he goes out to make sure San's like safe, and then, you know, like he doesn't actually like try to fight Lady Eboshi or anything like that you might think he might. Even then, even like after, you know, what happens, his aim is still safety. And so again, we just see like his such a strong moral code and his like rejection of violence, which is so incredible, like in the face of all this like brutality and violence that's just happened, you know, from like the siege of Irontown to the Battle of the Boars to like, you know, the fight at the edge of the lake here. Just his like rejection of that method and that like resolution is just all the more like amazing.
For sure, yeah, definitely. It is a very impressive sort of seeing him again. We've said this over and over again, but his kind of position defending what's right and being the in between the forest and the humans and protecting everything, and seeing kind of the different fights kind of going on all the time, and him kind of being in between all of them. It is a very, very interesting angle that we're getting a good viewpoint of every situation. We as the audience are seeing each different point of view. We're able to understand each point of view. What then happens is, as Lady Eboshi had said earlier, and I foolishly commented, that's not how it works. Indeed, if once a wolf's head is cut off, it can still bite you, as Moro's disembodied head wriggles over to Lady Eboshi and bites her arm off. What did you make of this scene?
It happened so quickly that I didn't quite register with me at first, like, what was happening. And then I was like, oh my god, like, you know, it just, like, you know, it all clicked. And I was like, wow, like, I mean, again, it is that, like, interesting thing of the kind of, like, final, you know, that, like, the death strike, basically, in that way. And, like, it was a real, like, surprise. But then I was like, oh my god, like, you know, thought back to that line that she had. And it felt like that kind of, like, fitting, like, you know, that kind of, like, fitting cycle of the events that were set up earlier on.
I think our next scene is back in Irontown, where they're fending off Lord Asano's men. Then the giant blob kaiju of the forest spirit is kind of covering over everything, engulfing everything, and Lord Asano's men are being sort of hit by the wave of the spirit, kind of. It's almost like a liquid, like this blob that's kind of washing through. And Toki, one of the women in the Irontown who we saw earlier, seems very sick of her husband Kuroko. He was the guy with the broken arm earlier. He's constantly coming across as a little bitch, and she's completely sick of him. Like, every woman in Irontown is far too good for the men that they're married to, which, I mean, you can say is always the case. San and Akitashi are both completely covered in the curse now. We see their entire body, face and everything is covered in the curse, whereas previously it kind of been restricted to Akitashi's arm and then his kind of upper shoulder, like kind of mid-torso kind of area, and we're now seeing that they're completely covered in the curse. And the next mission is to try and retrieve the head of the spirit, which is being taken by Jigo and his men, and they're trying to run away with his head in a bucket to try and sell it to the emperor. Of course, they get stuck on this little island, and Akitashi says, or Akitashi or San, I can't remember which, says that a human has to return the head, otherwise the conflict will not be resolved. So they return the head to the spirit, who is calmed, and it dies in peace, returning life to the mountain. It like falls onto Irontown. This kind of spirit form falls on Irontown, which creates like a giant wind, which puts out a lot of fires that had happened before, and but like also destroys a lot of the settlement, and you see life starting to grow back again around Irontown. The town itself becomes covered in trees, and the mountains around it covered in trees. And we also see that now both Akitasha and San's curses were lifted, for me brings up the point of, if this entire series of events hadn't happened, which involved the spirit dying, would Akitasha's curse have been lifted? Because it wasn't lifted earlier when he was cured by the spirit, but when the spirit died, it was cured. So is this not a net positive for Akitasha?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I think it's almost that way of like destiny, isn't it? It's almost like fated. Like he's fated to be cursed to then make this journey, set these things up, and maybe in a way, like if you look at it from that sense, perhaps that's why he doesn't like try to like, you know, in a way intervene and stop things. He's almost like an agent of fate at that point, you know, and he's playing his predestined role in all of this. And like it's almost like this has to happen. Like it's like this has to happen, and the forest spirit has to die because the world now is just, as we've said, is just at such like extremes. You know, there's no there's like almost no saving this version of the world at the minute. Like the humans and the animals and the spirits are just like opposed to each other. There's no like room for any kind of compromise. But with like the forest spirit's death, not only is like the kind of old forest like wiped away, but as well Irontown's destroyed. It's leveled basically, and then we get this new forest growing, as you said, like from the ashes of the old. And it's almost like a new world that can get a fresh start, and they can like hopefully learn from the lessons of the old one. Communication and compromise can grow, you know, rather than the conflict and fear and everything that characterized the old.
For sure, and it's a sacrifice on the part of the forest spirit, and which makes you wonder whether this was destined and preordained. If the forest spirit knew that this was going to happen and that it had to die in order for the forest to regain its health and for peace to be restored and all this kind of stuff. So that's very interesting. And so after our end is that the area is growing green and the credits start to roll, and it is a very, very strong ending. We understand that San Akitashi, I've been saying his name the entire time, but it still sounds weird to me, are together and they can be together. We don't know whether or not beyond this story if they stay together, but with Moro dead, we assume that San will likely take over the role for the wolf clan. And yeah, it's a very, very beautiful ending. What do you think of the ending?
Beautiful is the exact word to describe it, and it's just this fitting conclusion, and it's this really hopeful conclusion that as like we end on, and we can hope for this new world that, you know, a new way is going to reign of peace and tranquility. It's the perfect like payoff to everything this film set up, and for all like the bleakness and like, you know, horror and everything that has come before. Like we just get this really like as much as it's melancholic that like, you know, so many people have had to die and the forest spirit's dead, and you know, as is Akoto and Mora and like a lot of others, like we get this real sense of hope that something new can grow and can be built from it. So I think it's just the perfect ending.
I agree. I think it is an absolutely wonderful ending. I think that it finalizes everything that we've seen in the movie. I think it tidies everything away. Eboshi is still alive. She seems to have learned from the experience. Likewise with Jingo, I think was his name. Jigo. Likewise with Jigo, he's learned from the experience. The people of Irontown and the spirits are all now kind of on equal terms. They understand each other, I feel, and yeah, life kind of continues past this, but we don't know what's to happen. I think it's wonderful. So then, Adam, what were your overall impressions of the movie? What did you think of this in comparison to, say, some of your other Ghibli films? How does it rank in comparison to them?
I honestly loved this film. I think it is spectacular. I think it's definitely the best one that I've seen so far of Ghibli films, and I've really, really enjoyed the other ones I've seen as well. And maybe there's a little bit of recency bias because this is the one I've seen the most recently, but I honestly, there's nothing I can really fault with this film. I thought it was absolutely perfect. Like, it looks beautiful, like, it's beautifully told. I think its themes are just as relevant now, you know, as they were in 1997, and I think they will remain relevant for a long time to come. Mm-hmm. I just feel like everything, the characters in this film are amazing. I love how complex they are. Like, none of them really feel one-dimensional at all. Like, whereas, like, there's fantastic moments of beauty, but also moments of intense, like, violence and horror and fear and everything, and it's exactly what this film's about. it's brutally on. I love the brutally kind of honest storytelling in it. It's really, as much as a fantasy world, it doesn't feel like sugar coated or like kind of, like steeped in those kind of like that fantasy, like, oh, that kind of wonderful stuff. This feels like a real world. And you can recognize the characters and the problems and everything. And I actually really like that there's no like single like villain. There's not like one character that's like the evil and everything. The enemy of this film is hatred and fear, like its emotions and everything. And I think that's like such a powerful like message, and just seeing how corrupting they can be through this story, I think it's just everything about it, from its art style to its themes to its characters. The pacing is excellent. It is exactly as long as it needs to be. It doesn't drag. It's not boring at any point. Like, it's honestly a masterpiece. I absolutely love this film.
That's very well said, and I agree. I think it's very interesting that there you just say there's no one enemy. That there is at the start of the film, you might have thought like, oh, there's a demon. Maybe there's like a demon king or something that we are fighting against, or something like an evil entity that is influencing them to become these demons. But there's nothing like that. And my partner had said like, oh, so what was it that caused them to become demons? Was it this spirit of the forest? And I said, no, I don't think it was. I think it was purely a case of just their own hatred manifesting out into this evil entity. And I think that's the case, that it's hatred, and on the human side it was greed. They didn't have this evil entity manifesting, but greed is that evil entity that they, whether it be Jigo greedy for the money from the emperor, or Eboshi greedy for the power that the head might hold, or for the resources that are in the mountains. So it's very interesting. You have the hatred on the side of the forest, and then the greed on the side of mankind. And I think it's an absolutely wonderful film. I'm hesitant to say still that it is my favorite Ghibli film, because I've seen more Ghibli films since I used to say that. I still think it ranks incredibly high amongst my favorite Ghibli films, and I do think it is very different than most of other Ghibli films. The messaging in some ways is quite similar, but it is a lot more action orientated than most Ghibli films. Ghibli films are often very slice of life or just fantastical, whereas this seemed to have a lot of action, a lot of conflict in it, which not all Ghibli films does have. It's not the most gruesome or saddest. I would still give that to Grave of the Fireflies, but I think it uses its violence very effectively and in a very interesting way that isn't so much sad as just poignant. I applaud Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki for that. I think he created an absolutely fantastic film, and yeah, I'm excited for you to check out some other Ghibli films. I don't know that necessarily all will be as highly rated for you as this was, but I think that, yeah, I implore you and anyone else listening to check out more of the Ghibli catalog, because it is absolutely wonderful. If you are interested, and this goes to all the viewers and listeners as well, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Hayao Miyazaki and the history of Studio Ghibli, I do recommend the Wizard and the Bruiser podcast on Hayao Miyazaki. It came out probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. It was quite a while ago, but you'll be able to, if you just look up Hayao Miyazaki, Wizard and the Bruiser on Spotify, you'll find it. They are exclusively on Spotify, so you have to check there. But yeah, if you want to learn a little bit more about that, check them out. I think it's really good. Otherwise, do you have anything more you'd like to say about the movie or Studio Ghibli, or what your expectations are?
I would honestly just say, just second everything you just said. Just go. If you haven't seen this film, go watch it. If you've seen it, go watch it again. I think it's as one that I think is definitely probably worth a rewatch. Yeah, and check again. I've obviously not seen it, but I'm excited to check out some more. And I don't know whether any other Ghibli films will live up to this. I feel like the bar has been set so high. But honestly, I want to see more. I want to see more than that. I want to delve back into that world and see what else Ghibli and Miyazaki have made. To experience that. So yeah, if you've never seen a Ghibli film, go check them out, because they are amazing. They are honestly, and I don't think there's many things like them out there. They are very unique and worth celebrating and worth watching. So yeah, go watch Princess Mononoke. Go watch Ghibli films. Just dive into that world.
For sure, yeah. And I'll ask you quickly as well, how is this ranked in comparison to some of the other anime shows that you've watched? Either that we've made you watch or that you've watched independently.
This is definitely at the top.
Okay.
Compared, and I feel bad comparing it to some of the stuff that I have watched for Chatsu-Nani, because I feel it's so horrible to compare Beyblade.
I don't know what you're talking about. They're both about spirits.
Complete philosophical works about things, but about war and it's thing. But like, I feel bad comparing the two of them because Beyblade is what it is. You know, it's not trying to be this, and you know, it doesn't come close to this. But yeah, like honestly, this is like at the minute, this is like head and shoulders above. You know, I think a lot of other things, unless there's something that I've completely forgotten in my mind. But you know, I just thought this was spectacular.
Oh, glad to hear it. And does this make you interested in watching more anime movies in general, not just Studio Ghibli?
Yeah, I would like to try. Like again, I don't think I've seen any. If I have, I'm blank on them now. But I've certainly not seen many outside of the kind of like Ghibli. Not canon's the wrong word, but the Ghibli kind of like collection. It would be good to try some others because I know there are others out there that are like highly rated. So you know, it would be try and delve out and you know and see a bit more of what there is.
Well, you'll just have to experience that on another Chatsu-Nani episode, I guess.
Oh, I await with eager and bated breath.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. If you'd like to listen to some of our other episodes, we've done some on the Chatsu-Nani on Beyblade, as we mentioned, and Death Note. And the Chatsu-Nami podcast has done some absolutely wonderful recent podcasts and older podcasts. So if you'd like to check out any of those, just look us up on the Chatsu-Nami channel on all good podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube. You should also check out Satsunami42 on Twitter and Twitch. You can find me, Greenshield95, on Twitter. And yeah, I don't know if you want to plug anything, Adam, while we're on.
Come listen to me on Chatsu-Nami. That's where you get my unfiltered opinions and and views. So you got to come to the source.
For sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
In the words of our Lord and Savior Chatsu-Nami, thank you everybody for listening, stopping by. Thank you so much, Greenshields, for not only organising this episode, you know, but also suggesting this film because it was well worth a watch, and I'm so happy that I've seen it now, and now I can go tell everybody else to watch it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thank you for having me on.
No, absolute pleasure. So with that being said, everybody, all that's left for me to say is stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated.